everybody. Hey, guess what? It is Saturday, June 1st, 2019. This is Disclaimers by Ed Johnston. And, well, this is Ed, so we don't know what the hell he's going to talk about. He has a plan, and it always changes.
That,
Every single week, he starts
that's
talking about one
true. That is
subject, and he
true.
goes to a totally different one. So, the ranter and raver himself, here's Ed Johnston.
Thank you. And yes, it does change. That is all about education. And that's what we're going to get into tonight a little bit because it's been quite interesting with a group that I've been working with and sending information. And now they're attacking some of us because we won't register ourselves as non-United States citizens. I don't use the word citizen, U.S. citizen. And the way the guy portrays it, United States, capital U.S. and small citizen. And this is what I've been trying to explain to him. And that's why he keeps having problems with his stuff with the state and the county and the city. You know, he always fights them, and he always represents himself as a citizen. You know, and I've got, anyhow, it's just really frustrating. And, most of us know this gentleman, and I'll even just tell his name out because, it's ridiculous because if he's running this way, Ron Verooman, Vrooman, Ruman, it's very interesting when he does this because, I know a lot of people out there are getting misguided. And I don't talk about citizenship. I don't use the word person. He does. And I don't use a lot of these corporation names. and that's the one thing that really disturbs me because, he's out there telling people, I just emailed him back the structure of the organic constitution of the two constitution. One is from the District of Columbia, and the other one's the treaties and the constitution are the law of the land. And I've got arguments with him, too, even on the phone in the past years. And it's like, the treaties are the law of the land. And they want to get this grand jury going. And it's like, okay, you have to get in and take over the jury in the system. You come up making up your own government. There's 30 people out there with groups have their own government, including the Moors have their own government. They're saying that is out there and doing this and bringing this stuff out and saying this to protect you when all they're doing is nonprofit agencies that are making a buck off of you. And that's the other thing, too. You got to look at them because, when they're sitting talking about the thing called citizenship or the U.S. Constitution, it's like learn with these people with the wordings. Because, see, when people are using it, it even says that in the law of the structure that I'll try to get posted up, see if we can run it next week on it, or the following week, because next Saturday, I'll be back up in the hospital. I've got some other extraneous tests I have to go through. So I'm not going to do next Saturday because I'll be in testing. So, it's just the way it is. I like living, so I'm not arguing with these people. But anyhow, when it gets into the circumstances, it's like, a lot of these people are out there talking about your rights, your Constitution, and they're talking and explaining to you as a government agency. Cities, counties, and states are controlled by the Vatican and the City of London. And anybody wants this information, and tonight, when we get off tonight, I will be putting this up on the this information up on the Oregon Trackers YouTube channel so people can read this stuff. And read what the law is and what the treaties are versus statute, codes, and administrative rules. Now, we're starting to see some changes in this country. But the point is the only way the changes are going to happen is you file the criminal charges. And I've talked to a lot of people, over the years and recent, including this week, and it's like, you got to file the criminal charges. This is what you need to do. I'm suggesting this is what I would suggest you do. But I can't tell anybody what to do because they're supposed to be adults. I could have conversations, suggest things, give them evidence, and go that direction. But that's the one thing that people need to realize, that, when it comes down to this structure of our elected and public servants, and we're not a democracy, we're a public form of government. And I watch even these same men and women, including Ron, he even talks about the democracy and republic. And he talks about, I watch them bouncing back and forth on each subject. And it's like, either, we're just a republic. We're not supposed to be a democracy. Democracy is the federal corporation called the federal government, as most people know that, 3002. And, that's the one thing that people need to realize, that you have elected and public servants, or employees, whatever you want to call them. And that's why when I suggest to people, when you're going to court, before you get to court, file, I'm trying to just had a brain fart on the statement. You're filing a conflict of interest statement for each individual, the cop, the district attorney, the judge, the bookkeeper. Oh, yes, you want to include the bookkeeper for the county or the city. And you want to make sure you have the clerk involved, too. And then that way, the conflict of interest, because they all get paid by the system. Not one of them are independent. And see, this is the frustration that we go through when people don't comprehend this structure. It's like, when you go back in the history, when the Federal Reserve was, started, technically they were trying to shove it down our throats in 1871, but it didn't get through until FDR in 1913. And see, the 16th Amendment could not be passed or ratified. It was passed administratively. And that's the one thing that people need to realize. It's administration that's been passing. Your federal government, your senators and congressmen, they're federal employees of you. And so when they sit there and arrest you, kidnap you, assault you, that means you have to file in their state on what they deal with, theft of budget. Because they're stealing public funding, and that actually is a crime for them to bill that in the jails for that. It is a crime. But the only way it's going to start getting that people paying attention is, like I've talked to Ron, how about filing the charges? And I've seen some stuff he's done, but he's not making it personal. He keeps going on the system. And it's learning how to write your contracts, because that's basically what it comes down to. Article 1, Section 10 of the Constitution is you're writing a contract with the federal government. The federal government is the British government. It's called the Vatican. The District of Columbia. Washington, D.C. is not part of the United States. It's not part of we the people. And so when you pay your electricity, water bill, and all that, put a 1099 form in. And then that way they have to start paying taxes. If everybody started putting a 1099 form in, you would watch them change so quickly, because they know if they don't respond to it, the IRS has to shut them down by federal impersonation of a budget. And there are government agencies and police departments that have been literally shut down across the country over that. And we've done, I brought up the education on that with other people, and we've had conversations on this education show over the last several years on it. But see, the one thing is like when it comes down to this stuff, and it's like, Woodrow Wilson would have never been elected if it wasn't by the electoral college. And see, this is what gets to me. People don't read the Constitution and understand or comprehend how our men and women put this stuff together, and the natives put this stuff together with the treaties to protect ourselves. Because, it's like the 17th Amendment, it's corporation ratified. The only ones that technically can vote, and I've argued with Ron Verloon on this one, the only ones who can vote is elected and public employees, registered church members, and immigration that are, well, actually, technically, if you actually read the law, immigration cannot have jobs. They cannot work in this country. And they're not supposed to be employable. And that is a real fact. That is the one thing that is people don't comprehend, that people just don't comprehend how that works. And so when you do your affidavits and you're doing your information and you're bringing these facts out, that is the one thing that you have to work and produce the evidence yourself. And the evidence is what you went through. I've had many conversations with people this week, and it's like, all right, this officer did that. This officer did that. So now you need to be able to write their names down, get the information on the public servant, try to get their badge number, their personal deal, then file a Freedom Information Act on, their job contracts. See, and they're going to panic when you do this. I'm doing this with the city of, the city of Toledo, and this is the one thing that is so frustrating when, this guy is sitting there, classifying so much of us, as a waste of time. And, and it's like he keeps throwing, you keep trying to say the Vatican and this and that and how the tax write-offs work, but he doesn't read, So, that's the one thing that gets to me. You send people the information, you do the research, you go to congressional records, you can pull up the registration and the history of our country, of the states, except for Oregon. They've changed the Treaty of 1846 to make it like a democracy of 1859, and that's the one thing that Ron Vroom keeps going off of is the Treaty of 1859, and it's like, the treaty is 1846. That is the lawful treaty. The corporation permission slip to have a permission is a treaty of 1859. A state has a treaty that structure. That's why it just, it just gets to you, when you watch people do this. When he's sitting out there educating people, and I know I've watched him do it. I've seen this stuff with other people over the years with him. And it's really frustrating that he does this to people. And I've talked to him many times on the phone. I've tried to get him on this education show. Bring your facts, bring your evidence, let's talk. But he wants to sit there and argue instead of talking. And then trying to tell me that, the government of the British government and the Vatican has nothing to do with it. And it's like you send him the treaties, you send him the information from the House and Senate, and it's like it doesn't even penetrate his head. And see, when he sits there and does these United States citizen classes that he does, he's keeping people in a system. And so, we have a difference of opinion. I'm going by a statute, codes, and administrative rules of the Constitution and treaties. I'm not going by the statute, codes, and administrative rules of the corporation, a.k.a. the British government and Vatican. And people say, that's not true. And it's like, when you pay your income taxes, your federal and state income taxes, not a dime stays in this country. But I can prove it. The MIF. It goes right to Puerto Rico. Puerto Rico ships it and divides it between the Vatican and the British government called the Queen. And the evidence is on new.org and trackers. We have the stuff up there. It's been proven. It's been tracked. So that is the one thing that is frustrating when you got all these people out there trying to educate people. And most of them don't do the actual research. They don't open their mind because they think like the 14th Amendment, that was ratified. The 14th Amendment was ratified by the corporation. After the Civil War, we're still fighting the corporation, so we end up hiring elected and public servants, if that makes rational sense. So we have elected and public servants. And so when we have elected and public servants, these are what people got to realize that they have a job to do. Like the clerk has a job for the court. The clerk has a job for the city. When you file your paperwork, they're supposed to file it, register it. And when you file it, always get it stamped and make sure you get a certified copy when you're there. Because these are steps that people need to make to protect themselves. You know, and that's the one thing that, oh, here went my, you know. So, but anyhow, people make these mistakes. And it's like, I've been there, I've done it until I put the pieces together and really sat there and got it. You know, and that's when I started going, hey, whoa, here's the whole thing. You step back and you start really looking, you know, and that is the point that you are paying attention and looking at the structure. Because you have to pay attention to what goes on in your life. And so, and that is the one thing, if you're not filing your paperwork at least to the best of one's ability and reading the laws and reading how the court proceedings go, doesn't mean you apply to the court proceedings. You just have to comprehend what the court proceedings are doing, what, why, and how they're working in their court. And that's the best way you could do it. And when you do your paperwork, always do your federal paperwork. You know, you always send your copies to the local, but you always make sure it goes to the federal. Washington, D.C., and the only court in Philadelphia is the lawful court of the United States of we the people. And it's like the natives, you know, all they got to do is go file on the corporation business owners, and you'll watch them run like crazy. But people don't, everybody wants to fight and yell and argue and think they have a right to this job or have a right to that. You know, I mean, everybody thinks that they have a right to a job. You know, and you have to go get a job. You don't have a right to a job. People go out and, well, I'm registered at the state unemployment office. Well, what does the state unemployment office do? They run you around. They know your business. They know your income. They know everything about you. You give up your rights, so that way you have no rights. So it's just very, very real of what we're living right now. You know? And see, this is the one thing is a factor that people have to go through these things to comprehend. It's like the Dred Scott case, you know. It's like when you read these court cases, you know, sit back and read them. And most people don't read them. And that is the problem that everybody's having because they're not reading, they're not paying attention, they're not learning, and they're jumping to conclusions. And then everybody's got to put a crazy thing called religion into their conversation of the Constitution and treaties. The Constitution and the treaties give you right to your freedom of your religion, not to have your religion in our government. Our government is supposed to be pure, and everybody's panicking why I don't agree with them taking the Bible out, what the Democrats have done. On that point, to swear in court, because I believe you should swear on the devil's book because it's their book. You know, I do believe that should be still there for that circumstance. And so when we go through these channels and we go through these circumstances, how do we get to the best of our ability to get there? You know, so this is the one thing that we're going through the structure of what we're fighting on today. So it just depends on what you want to accomplish. You know, if you're going to stand up, remember, you're going to get bumps and bruises along the way. Sometimes it takes a lesson to learn. But then sometimes people get right off the bat and they don't have these issues. You know, and that's the one thing to look at, what, why, and how. And like I said, you got to remember, you're the United States is a corporation. That's why under the 1938 Foreign Administration Act, that everybody has to register as foreign relations under required by oath of law. 22 CFR 92.12. -92.31. I mean, they do this for a reason to protect us from immigration, to protect us sometimes even from our own selves, because if we don't pay attention to what the law says and the treaties say, and everybody wants to go off in these different directions. I mean, it's like Social Security. You know, a good valid point. Everybody goes, I need Social Security for a job or a bank account. No, you don't. You know, I've had many, many jobs over my life where I didn't have Social Security numbers in my system. I mean, but, you know, the one thing is I did pay into it because it is an insurance fund. It's not a government agency until William Jefferson Clinton put it that way. And I believe it was March 9th, 1993. And that's on new.org and trackers. And, you know, but see, after he did that, then all of a sudden that goes into the treaty that happened, the International Affairs of 1963. And when he did that, that turns Social Security into the IMF, International Monetary Fund. And, oh, who runs that now? Oh, the United Nations. So when people say, well, we need to support this in the United Nations and stuff, we know you're supporting the enemies. You don't realize what they're doing. You're taking away your rights. And without Trump right now filing on this stuff and bringing this stuff together, especially immigration, he's taking one hell of a hit on immigration. But you guys got to realize that the immigration is to protect you and your home. You know, I mean, I'm not going to let somebody come into my house and tell me how to live. Are you going to allow that you're saying? So, I mean, it's like sitting back, watching the ruffles in it and paying attention to what goes on. And like I said, I will be posting this information up that I sent back to Ron Verum in the group, you know, and it's like the Pope claims he owns the entire planet through laws and conquest. Oh, that goes back to 1495 and 1493, but that's the start of the Treaty of 1213, and the Magna Carta, the Treaty of 1213 and the Magna Carta 1215. And the Magna Carta is from England, so when you're going into an Article 1 court, the Magna Carta might work for you. I know people that have put it in, some have worked, some that don't. So it just depends on the public employee at the time. And that's the truth. It does come down to the public employee. And remember, these are public employees. You know, if you're a public employee, a registered voter, you elect them on the positions they're doing. And it's your responsibility to hold them accountable. But everybody says, oh, we'll just let it go to the next election, we'll vote them out. Yeah, I mean, how many times I've seen that where the next election comes and the polls say that this man or this woman is going to lose the election, and somehow they pull it off. Isn't that interesting? So, I mean, this is the one frustration we are living today. You know, and that is the one thing that is like some states are passing to make sure that you don't need to have a license to have fully automatic weapons. And the Democrats are yelling and screaming right now across the country about it, you know, and trying to come up with new ways to put new law enforcement in to disarm you. And they are working with the United Nations. Pelosi is working with the United Nations to disarm this country. So please don't be fooled by that one. And that's the one thing that we shouldn't be fooled by a lot of the stuff that's going on. And it is scary what's going on. We're living this stuff, you know. And that is the one thing, too. You know, natives are not guaranteed the court structure, their court structure. See, we're supposed to technically go to our tribal court. That's not the tribal court, but if you know what I mean, with the elders. And, you know, that's part of the treaty structure. But see, when you go in, you give over your rights and you sign these paperwork and you give these people the authority over you, and then you wonder why, you know, you get screwed around. I mean, that's the one thing that, you know, when I filed my paperwork and everybody's like, Ed, why did you do this? You shouldn't have done that. You know, then that way you're not going to be able to do this, that, and the other thing. And it's like, no, I get more rights by doing it. And that's what I'm fighting right now is I'm trying to get this other stuff filed. Got the other email. I will finish up and get that out, and we'll get that posted on new.org and trackers on the city of Toledo. And I'm filing the other one on county here in the next 48 hours. I've got to get that done before I go back up to Portland. because I got things I got to do up there, for, medical stuff. So I got to focus on that and pay attention. So it is interesting, with the circumstances when you go through some of the stuff and the experiences, especially when you die and you look at it. And the other thing that gets to me is that it always gets to me with the ALCU. They know the 14th Amendment could not have been passed. It wasn't ratified. I'm even reading their own structure that even says it. So, and the ACLU even came out and proved that the cops are revenue collectors. But that went around Facebook, and we're going to get it up on Oregon Trackers, but it comes to you people getting this information out, too. The Supreme Court says that the state does not own your child. They have to have a warrant. That way you have to file your paperwork to prove if you're a lawful bloodline native or if you're a corporation citizen. And if you're a corporation citizen, you're still paying for the privilege of protection. That just depends on the circumstances of what goes on. And it is case-by-case basis. When it comes to those type of things. But when it comes down to your rights to travel, hunt, and fish, it's not case by case if you're native. It's equal. The treaties and the Constitution are equal across the board for all natives. And see, that's the one thing that Ron Varun doesn't like, because I sit there and I classify myself as lawful bloodline native. And he gets upset at me, you should classify yourself as a non-United States citizen. And it's like, no, I'm not going to do that. I've already done that when I put my filing, and I just filed with the Secretary of State. And I sent him that, but he doesn't read it. So, that's the one thing. I don't have to sit there and scream and yell and advertise, and play that deal. He can, do whatever he wants to do. Telling me and about a dozen other people that basically were worthless, because we won't jump on the bandwagon with him because, he keeps going by the Treaty of 1859. I'm not going to accept that administrative rules to run me because we are the government. We, the fourth branch, and Judge Scalia made that perfectly clear. And that's the one thing that people need to realize what some of the past judges have done and why they were taken out. A lot of these guys stood up, and when they stood up, the people didn't back them. That's the saddest part. Even I got a YouTube video with State Senator Arnie Roebling on the rights to travel and uninsured motorist fund when the Democrats stole the uninsured motorist fund in 2000. And I got this on YouTube video where he's going, "Oh yeah, we just spent the money, Ed. It's gone." It's like, no, it's not gone. There's a paper trail. There's got to be electronic trail somewhere. It's not gone. That's the people's money. That's not the state for them to bail out PERS. So the state's using other funding to bail themselves out for them partying and not spending and saving. They're not saving money. They're just spending money like crazy. And that's the way they're mentally taught to keep a business going. But if you did that with your business like that, you wouldn't be in business. You'd be bankrupt and you'd be in jail for fraud. And it's interesting how these people get away with it. That's why the one thing is that you always, when you put in your letters, please put in the Foreign Agent Registration Act and ask if they filed. Put the link of it to it so that way it makes it easy. They could click right on it, and then when you make your report, make sure you call when you email your letters out and file it with that agency. And then when they file late, then that way you have ammunition to go back after them by law. They wrote it, we quote it. That's the whole point. That's the whole point. So it's like municipalities, your city, county, and states. There's state codes, statutes, and administrative rules. They're an active legislative of the state, and that is the point. And people say, "Oh, we need to give back the state control." Yeah, we need to give back the state control to the people, not to the corporations. And that's what these people don't comprehend when they're out there screaming and yelling, and they don't even have a concept of what's really going on in the real world because they're not educated. You know, it's interesting because the other one that people are arguing with, Roe versus Wade again. If the woman don't have a right to her body, neither do you. It's just that simple. You know, we can't keep fighting each other on fundamentals of bullshit. Somebody taught me to think this way, so because I'm not open-minded to read the Constitution or comprehend what its meanings. You know, that's why, you know, I sent back to Ron, you know, here's the deal. Learn someday. You know, and that's what, you know, his deal is, you know, he keeps going, well, you know, you're telling people the British government and Vatican, well, yeah, it's the tax codes. Read it. It says it right in the structure. It says it right in the United Nations front page. See, I mean, that's the whole beauty about when they put the stuff up on the front pages. And that's why I suggest when you get them and you have them, save them, because they are altering things like crazy because people are waking up. They're talking about the misinformation that's given out there. You know, it is one of those things that we're fighting across the territories here. You know, because I'm in state. We're going by state corporations, territory, or regions. You know, and then when people talk about I'm a national citizen, I'm a national or citizen, and it's like, what is that deal that FDR passed? All elected, all nationals and citizens are enemy to we the people. See, people don't read these things the way they read. They read them with interpretation, and it's, you know, when you read certain things that are written that are done specifically, you cannot interpret unless you read it, and you can interpret it, and you can see where they screwed up and they're trying to cover it. So that happens sometimes. But that's the part of learning this stuff. You know, and that was the point. 1874, a private Congress was forced to change to the corporation. Went into bonds, you know, and that's when they were paying the debt bonds. And that came from World War I that they were starting that, paying that off. And see, you know, we don't have that. Remember, even in the Revolutionary War, the King of England funded both sides because he knew he had to make a contract with both sides if he won or if we won. See, I mean, and that's the one thing. It's like, you know, Soros is doing the same thing. All these guys do the same thing. You know, and that's the one thing you got to look. I mean, even, what's his name? Trump. You know, they everybody likes living, you know, so they do this stuff. And that was the one thing that FDR was a socialist, communist, and he started, and when he was able to put the stuff in, started Illuminati's in this country. That was called the United States government system. So you got to remember, the United Nations was first a League of Nations. And that's where people, you know, don't read this stuff, combine this stuff, and bring it all together and analyze it. Sit back and look at these things and how all these things play to one thing to another. You know, that's like we have a right to travel without without license. What that means, if we injure somebody or property damage, we're personally liable. So the old days, when you did that and you harmed somebody and you took a family member out, the injured party, the perpetrator had to fill up the void. Had to go mow the lawns or pluck the chickens or, you know, feed the cows. So they had to make up for those. And that's the way the American system was formed. You know, that's what the Constitution and the treaties are all about. It's called personal responsibility and liability. Not creating so you can sit there and go, I'm a drug and alcoholic and I can make excuses. You know, I mean, that's the one thing. I always love it with drunken alcoholics. They say, well, I'm a drunken alcoholic. Well, you know, I feel sorry for you making a public statement that you're not responsible. And that's the one thing, you know, that tells me that they're not responsible, because when I do that, and when you go back into the history since the Bankruptcy Act went through, the bankruptcy in 1913, there hasn't been no real election since. They've already been altering this stuff. I mean, even with the old paper cards, they were busted for false counts and stuff. And now they want to do this stuff on the internet and computer, so then that way they can enter their own numbers in. I mean, it just, and people just, to me, it's just amazing sometimes how people cannot see the corruption right in front of their face, and, you know, and then think it's acceptable because the way they're taught, the way they're, you know, educated for not comprehending. You know, it's like the 14th Amendment. I have fun with people on the 14th Amendment. You know, do you know what the 14th Amendment is? Do you realize what it is? The 14th Amendment gave man and woman their freedom so long as that you accepted it, took it. But if you want to claim you're a citizen, you can't be free. And that's the one thing that people are not getting this. This is like when you want to call yourself a citizen, you're not free. And it says it right in the laws. You know, we quote them, we put them up. I'll be putting the laws up tonight. Holy mackerel, looks like I beat my old number. I'm going to be putting up this information tonight on the YouTube channel, so that way people can read this stuff, what I'm talking and what I've said about, you know, dealing with Ron and this stuff with the country. I'll put up the treaty of 1846, the original one that says we're not to pay taxes anyways, period, in the story. Contract with the British government and the Vatican of 1846. And that's the one thing that the state of Oregon was throwing historical documents out in the garbage. You know, that was back in 2000 when they were doing the Paper Reduction Act, 2005. So they were just throwing everything in the garbage, you know, and, you know, no history, no recollection. So if they could destroy history, it makes it better for them. And that's where people don't really get how these things really work when it comes down to the problems we're having in this country. You know, they really don't get it, because if we're having this problem, could you imagine what everybody else's problems are having around the country as well? So, I mean, we're just a glimpse on the bumper here. So, I mean, you know, that is the one thing when it comes down to this stuff. How do you handle your situation? You know, it is nice to have people to talk to. Sometimes people don't have people to talk to, and you just got to read, watch videos, put things together. You can't assume anything, because everybody knows what assume means. So you want to get away from assumption. And I mean, that's the one thing, even with your court cases, you cannot assume. You want it in writing. Because the one thing is, you never trust a public employee. We do have good public employees, don't get me wrong. I do know we have good public employees. I've worked with them. I've dealt with them. I've seen them. I've talked to them. But they're caught in the ledge, too, because if they speak up, they get singled out and attacked by the bad ones. So it is filing your paperwork, doing this stuff, and make sure it's known. And that means when you do file your paperwork, make sure it's posted at the city hall, the county, make sure it's posted at the state, make sure it's filed with the state and the county. You know, we do have the laws up there when you file your paperwork, how the county and state has to do these things. So, I mean, and that's the one thing about this stuff is learning how these things work. Learning the circumstances of what, why, and how. So, and, you know, it's educating yourself. If you don't do it and you don't do it for your children, nobody else will. So, I mean, and that's the one thing is that, when these guys are sitting out there doing this stuff and not comprehending, and, I always love when people try to say, well, you keep trying to tell the people that it's a British system. Well, look at Title 183002. It's Corporation of the British Government. Filed in Florida, downtown Florida, and the original filing of that with the British government was 1911. And I believe we have that up on the website, too. So that's the one thing that, we're only quoting. They wrote this stuff. I don't believe in myself. I don't believe in, religion or any of that structure myself. Because it's just, to me, it's just, I don't believe in it. I'm not going to sit there and call myself and take a title of nobility. And that's the one thing that people don't comprehend this. I mean, it's like when you try to explain to people what the system is and how it's working. I mean, I've been watching the changes with my filings, and when I go into different structures of the public employee structures, I'm watching these changes. I'm literally watching these changes. So by filing this stuff and doing this stuff and working through this stuff, it does happen. And right now I am fighting on my rights to travel. I'm trying to get that through. I got to file the other paperwork because that's a structure of the what do they call that? Destroying our Constitution rights. And they're doing that constantly. But they're doing it because people don't know the law. They're signing their rights away. They're signing their kids away. And you try to explain this to some people, and they go, well, we want to be able to react and do something. And then they don't want to do nothing about it. So, I mean, it's like, and that's the one thing that is frustrating. You can send people all the information you want. It just depends how they want to learn it. Now, I know that I've been slandered on a few things because I talk about the British government. I talk about the structure of the IRS tax forms. I talk about what's filed in the Secretary of State's office. And people want to sit there and tell people I don't know what I'm talking about. Go prove me wrong. I send you the paperwork. I proved it. I've been there. I even sent the stuff out when, before Richardson died. I take it I'm rambling, huh? So
no, you hit 100 on that last Therefore, you got the Chinese gone.
Oh, Jesus, no! Okay, you got that one loud and clear. Boy, I never expected to hit that one. Well, anyhow, I got to pay more attention to my you-knows. But anyhow, this is the whole point about reading this information, getting this information out. And when people sit out there and they want to give all this information out and misguide you in the structures, that's fine. I mean, it's like, it's just so interesting when people sit there and don't want to tell the truth of what's going on in your system. They always want to go to the state, like Ron Veroni. All he talks about is the state of Oregon, 1859. That's not the treaty of the state of Oregon. That is not, it's a corporation structure. So getting this stuff out, getting the information out is very important, especially for your children, so they get to know the truth compared to what these other people want to do because, a lot of these people out there that are going out telling these kids what to do and the structure, there's no offense to them. They have a constitutional right to the religion, but they don't have a constitutional right to shove it down our throats because their religion is not to be in our government. Moors, Muslims, Christians, whatever, it's not to be in the Public Employees Union government. It's like Kim when she sat there and refused to file the paperwork on the gay guys in Kentucky. I mean, she had a job to do, and she said, "Oh, my religion." You don't have a religion when you're on the clock. You have administrative rules that you are to follow, and that's what public servants have to do, is follow their administrative rules. See, and it's simple. I mean, and that's their job. They're not entitled to have an opinion because they gave up their rights for a paycheck and employment security called medical and dental, so that way they are not in the private sector. They didn't want to be in the private sector, and that's the one thing that the Public Employees Union, as well as, the Clintons and the Democrats have been doing for years, destroying this country by taking this stuff out, not educating the kids. I always love it when these public employees, these senators and congressmen, they write this stuff up, but they don't read it. Oh, that's right. They don't write them up. They have their attorneys and their advisors do that. See, that is the one thing that people don't know how the system works. And once you comprehend how the system works, then you start having a little bit different opinion. So anyhow, I guess with that one, we're going to open up the floor, see if anybody's got any comments.
All participants are unmuted.
Anybody go ahead.
Yeah, I sent you something. I know it's a guy that's a lawyer, but the thing is that he was saying certain things that were following along the lines of what you were saying, even what you're saying tonight about. He says that judges and lawyers are buffoons. They don't even read their own stuff that they're doing. The only reason that they're doing it is because it's repetitiveness. They don't know what the Beckham law says. They don't even open up the books to read it. All they know is, oh, hey, yeah, this worked for me last time. I'm going to follow this. So when you write this stuff, like you're saying, if you read it and you write this stuff, they're not going to read all that. They don't want to have to spend the time to read. They're not reading the law books that they have now, and they just skim over with, Black Law's Dictionary, which is a joke. All they're doing is just doing repetitiveness. Now, this guy said that one of the things was that, like, a lot of people, they sit here and they complain, like what you always say. They whine and whine about this and that. Like, for example, taxes. They sit here and say, death of taxes. I wish I didn't have to pay taxes. We don't. I mean, if you go back and read the 16th Amendment, it literally tells you, one, as you said, it was administratively passed, so it really doesn't affect us. Then two, it says to lay taxes. Now, what's missing from it? The laws to file against you for not paying taxes. It says that Congress could lay taxes, but it didn't say anything else. And that's
but it didn't even say who they can lay it on. It says, oh, wait a minute, they can only lay it on themselves.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's the thing. You got to read and know how, like you said, read in between the lines. The answers are there. You just got to know how to work the system. And it's not that hard because these idiots don't even read their own stuff. So, I found it to be amusing. The guy that I sent you went over, history. He covers the Bible and stuff, but, that's to everybody's opinion. But the point was that he was covering history. He was turning around and explaining a lot of the stuff, just like what you were doing. And then also he went into explaining how to fill out civil and criminal complaints for state or even federal courts, which I thought was very informing because I was like going, oh, that's nice. And he kind of goes in detail over it, but then he also kind of leaves it somewhat open where, hey, it'd draw out more questions that you would possibly have unless you were actually there. So, it was a good, overview of everything, and also to hear it from somebody from their own mouth who is a lawyer actually admit lawyers and judges are buffoons. And besides that, he also even went as far as to explain about when they sign something, they're on a a drug dependency. Because he says, was it this woman, Audrey McNichol, talked about that when you're trying to, write something, it's real close and it's like almost unreadable, that it shows that you're have a dependency, drug dependency or alcohol dependency. If you draw well,
but also too, there are people who write and can't write that way.
Yeah, I mean,
so,
she also did say that it has to happen about 3 or 4 times before you could actually say that that's what they're on. But like she says, if you stab your 0 or your O, you're a thief or you're hiding something. You speak with a forked tongue. I was going listening to this. I was going over. I was like, oh man, I really got to read a lot more of this. But like the guy said, he literally said, these people do not like reading. Nobody seems to like reading. And all this information is sitting right there in front of you. All you have to do is go read it.
They like the time on the golf course better.
Yeah. It's like watching grass grow, but it's at least you're getting something out of it. But the whole thing was about, go to the Daggum Law Library, pull up these cases, pull up the Bouvier's, and he mentioned another book. I can't think of the name of it, but he says open it up, read it, find out what this stuff is, and don't read, like he also said, like you've said numerous of times, don't read the opinions. The opinions don't count, even from a DA or a judge or a federal judge. Those are opinions. What you want are the facts of the case,
right?
The rulings. Those are what you want out of this. That, if you want to put that in your document, hey, not a problem. You can use that. But when it's an opinion, you throw it in there, it carries no weight. It's like a guideline, but it really doesn't carry any weight.
No, that's true. And it's like when they write Senate and House bills, they write the purpose up the top of the bill, and they write what the changes, and they write the financial expenditures of what it's going to raise taxes, what it's going to raise fees. I mean, and it's interesting when you get to start reading this, because I literally have read thousands and thousands of House and Senate bills. I mean, I did that 3 Senate session, read all the bills. 2,900, and the other ones were like 3,500 bills that they put in, and they throw them in as throwing paint on a wall, scattering it out and see what might work. And that's what they do. Is they throw it basically on the wall and seeing what's going to work.
I hope something sticks.
Go ahead.
No, I was going to say, hoping something would stick.
Right. Well, and that's the whole point. If they could convince the general public that, everything's a privilege, and that's what the structure is right now today, everything's a privilege, even though we have rights, and it's like, like we got one guy that we all know always says, hey, if you got a right, prove it. And he's got a valid point. When these people don't even enforce their own laws and they rape, rob, and pillage. And they think that's acceptable. And I always talk to people, well, isn't that the foundation of Christianity, the Muslims, the Moors? Isn't that what they all did? And then they always like to come back and say, well, the Indians, they had slaves too. And it's like, well, everybody had slaves. Everybody went raped and robbed so that way they could pass their bloodline down. It hasn't changed. So when people start using, the Indians did this and the Indians did that, they're going by, a lot of it going by history, of somebody else writing that history. It's like when people win wars, they write the way they want people to read the way the war was won. You know, I mean, we've had ceasefires in this country many, many times, and with other countries. You know, and it's interesting watching these people running around with trying to attack with Trump on, you know, the borders and all this stuff. I mean, we got one guy, Johnny Horton, that's still in jail, and, you know, with his people. It's interesting because nobody wants to file the criminal charges on the people that kidnapped him. And I think that needs to have authority. Go ahead.
Also, don't forget, they also, what do you call it, stole his vehicle.
No, yeah, not property, yes, as well.
Yeah, because, what was it, I listened to them, and they said that his vehicle was still impounded, and they had to get it transported once they got enough funds together to get it out and then have someone transport it back to his place. But then he had a medical issue because they put him in general population and they started hitting him and stuff.
No, they did that deliberately, and he got assaulted by Mexicans and the guard. I mean, that was deliberately done to try to teach him a lesson. And see, that's why when people say, well, it doesn't matter if I file, you know, and it's like when Ron Varun tells me, well, you're not filing as a non-citizen, and, you know, I'm lawful too. And it's like, well, if you're lawful, prove it. And I've had those conversations with him on the phone. How many generations does your family go back? You know, and he doesn't want to answer these things. And it's like, well, you know, just because you might be born on the soil doesn't mean you have rights. And when he keeps going by the Constitution of 1859 of the corporate IMF treaty, when that became the IMF, when the United Nations was put in, and that was when the 1963 international law of the Universal Commercial Code went through in our administration. Because prior to 1963, we didn't have that stuff. You know, most tickets and all that, people didn't, you know, the cops didn't write tickets, and most people didn't get harassed. You know, that didn't really start being pushed until the late 70s and 80s. You know, and that was just because the new cops were getting a percentage and the old cops were just not going to play the game. And these guys know it. Go ahead.
That's the other thing that the gentleman covered about officers. Officers didn't come in until I think he said 1915 or 1913. He said that they were actually, the officers were actually working at companies protecting them, and they were not protecting the average citizen or the people. So, I mean, this didn't come about until much later. So studying all this history and learning all this kind of gives you a different perspective of how we got to where we are now. Because as he said, a lot of, all the way back then with congressmen, I think he said there was like 42 or 42 lawyers that signed or they were working on changing it and making it more the way they want the Constitution. So, I mean, right there, that shows that this has been going on for a long time, and the way they worded it was to protect them. But 99% of the people back then, during that time period, were uneducated. So you couldn't vote because you're uneducated, you didn't own property, because you were black.
Don't forget Chinese. It was all colors. It wasn't just black. Because,
I know.
you know, because, I mean, they didn't allow the Chinese to really start voting. What was that, 1897? I think it was something like that, you know, when they started allowing some of this stuff to be public and out there. You know, and they still had the propaganda because, see, when you go to vote, I mean, it's like I had conversation with different people because, I mean, with workman's comp in 2000, they put in workman's comp system. Prior to that, we had a structure of public employees and private sector. Now today, workman's comp and private sector all in one. So if you get injured, lose a limb or something like that, then they put you on federal disability instead of paying you off. And so what they do is that these court cases have already been settled in these matters. They already have the money in the bank. So what they do is they take that money and they put it in a trust and bleed it off to you a little bit by a couple months here and a couple months there, or your monthly dividend. And what they do after that, then they pocket the rest. And that's the one thing that I believe, and there were the whole big conversation years back, was people were going, well, they were spending their money and, blowing their money, and they ended up on welfare. Well, that's a bunch of BS, folks. They didn't end up on welfare. They bought businesses. They developed. They hired employees. They made the country prospering again. But the Public Employees Union did not like that. Neither did the public employees, because when they got injured, they got the basics and they didn't get a settlement. They didn't get lots of damages. They got a little bit of loss and damages, but they got set up on a monthly staple what they're doing to us on disability. And that's the one thing, disability is supposed to be for natives, not for foreigners. And we've got all this money going out to foreigners. That's why Donald Trump said, let's stop this. And he did sign a bill on that, and I posted that up on the wall and sent that in. He did sign a bill on that, and so he is paying attention. But people got to realize he's caught in the middle, too, in some regards, too. He can only fight for the country so much, but also, too, it takes the country to fight. And the country is fighting. They're standing up, but trying to educate people as they're standing up to know the words and the meanings and knowing what the flag's meaning and knowing the circumstances of what is on top of the flag and how these circumstances really matter in people's lives. And so in that video, you sent that video to me, right?
Yes.
So I guess I'll go ahead and put that up on the wall. I'm in on the YouTube video tonight, too. I'll put that up on new.org and trackers because I'll watch it, too. I might not be able to get to it until I get up north, but I will get to that and watch it because then I'll start doing research on it and plug some of the stuff he says, and if he's around, I'll call him and have a conversation with him. I might be able to get him on the show. Who knows? Because, if he's bringing out that type of education, and that helps. Because, I've worked with a lot of lawyers that were bringing out stuff, and they were doing good, and then the next thing you know, they crawled in a hole. So that just tells me that they didn't have their security in place. So it is a frustrating situation. Go ahead.
Yeah, like I said, there are some things I have a problem with because of what he says, because it's not, he's still keeping the person as a citizen or as a slave. But the majority of it, he's kind of telling how it is, but I thought it was just something good that, kind of give you a general idea of of what you need to do. So all these questions that they keep bombarding you with, they can turn around and just go ahead and go to the third video, because it's 3 videos. Just go to the third one, and that'll explain all the stuff that everybody's wanting to learn, because everybody's always trying to do that. He did say that there's 84. You got to know about the civil and criminal federal codes, and there's 84 of them. So make sure you learn those, and then he goes through, hey, because if you try doing this, this is what they'll hit you with. This is why you want to know what you're doing before you go in, because they can kick it out.
Mm-hmm.
So,
And that is a very valid point. You want to get this stuff in before you go to court, so that way you're arguing it before you go to court, because then if you're arguing it in paper, then they're going to postpone the damn court date, too. And
Yeah.
I've seen that, and I've had it happen to me where I had a court date that was postponed for 14 months, and then all of a sudden it just didn't exist. Well, I mean, it is knowing and learning. But see, the point that you brought up, and that's the one thing when you watch the other two videos, is write down when he's wrong, because remember, he's not exactly wrong. He's telling you from his side, he's bringing both sides out, but he's still caught in the middle because he has a bar license, even though there's no such. But he's a member of a bar club, a bar card member of a club. So, I mean, you know, you got to give him credence on that, and he's bringing out, especially when he sat there and says that, oh, lawyers and judges are bullshit, so he just told you I'm bullshit too.
Yeah.
Do you get where I'm coming from now?
Oh, yeah. And he even turned around and said that even your elected officials, he said that they don't do anything for you. I mean, and if you go around asking people, what has an elected official done for you? And they'll say nothing. What have they done to you? Nothing. Okay, what has a judge done to you? Oh, well then, hey, he says it's political. That's what it is. Your elected officials don't really run it. It's the judges, because they hold a political position on what they're doing. But then he didn't. You could kind of see where he was going with it, because it's not just political; it's also financial.
Well, absolutely. But the other point is, don't forget the bar is the one who are writing the House and Senate bills when they go to court, and they're the ones writing administrative bills. That when they pass these bills, the lawyers are writing them. Oh, there's a big shocker for the general public. Oh, yeah, you didn't know the lawyers wrote them, not your senators and congressmen? Some of them get involved if they have the knowledge. Okay, some of them do, but they always have attorneys and lawyers and, you know, the people in there writing it for them.
The biggest shocker to me was knowing that Nancy Pelosi is a lawyer, and when Obamacare was coming out, she says, well, we have to pass it to know what's in it.
Yeah, that I always loved Pelosi on her little bullshit statements. Yeah, we got to pass it, so then that way, you don't need to know what's in it until you pay it.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what that meant. So until you pay the bill, we're not going to do it. Now remember, they're calling these things when they do a Senate and House bill, or any type of administrative bill from the city administrator or any of that. It's a bill. It's a bill to you. And people don't get that comprehension. It's just that simple. It's a financial instrument and bill to you. Which I always find interesting, how people don't get how simple it is. You know, and I like it when Ron is sitting there saying how all the, me and all these other people are wasted time because we won't sit there and do his grand jury stuff. I've been through that with the foundation of the grand juries, with national ones for going back 15 years ago with all these groups. And it's like, and then I had one of the big groups, and all of a sudden they started going to their local courthouses and basically taking it over. And it's like, then they started getting remedy. And that's the point. You got to have people in the courthouse that are we the people, not on the toll. Because, see, the one thing on grand juries and grand jury advisors, they cannot be elected and public employees. And technically, they can't even be immigration or immigrants on it at all. See, and that is in the law. So, that's the thing that, people don't read it, I always have fun with people, all the time. I had fun with this one lady, we're talking, I'm giving her information on her structure of what's going on. You know, then all of a sudden it's like, well, I don't want to do it. I'm just going to pay the money. And it's like, well, good luck. Why the hell did I waste my time? You know, and that's the way I feel about it, too. Because why are we wasting our time with these people that don't give a damn? And trust me, I deal with that all the time. You know, I mean, when, you know, this guy, and I've been through that with even a national, what the hell is that, somebody, not the, with Johnny's site. I'll have to think about it here in a minute. People know what I'm talking about. I'm having a real brain fart on that one. But I'll get to you here in a minute on that one. But it's like we got these groups out there that are sitting there and keeping people in the system. And so I keep wondering how much these people are paid, you know, and then you find out most of them are government employees. Well, that says a hell of a lot, don't it? You know, retired government employees, and so they think they have a right to dictate. So that's what always amazes me about public employees. You know, and people don't get it. Remember, they're saving their job. I've been a public employee. And, of course, I was fired because I wouldn't sell my soul to the company store. But that's just the way it happened with me. You know, and I don't have an issue with it. I mean, that was a learning lesson about politics and honesty about people in the system. So, and that is the whole point. It's honesty. And where is the honesty? And see, that is the one thing that is crazy. You know, the Democrats are trying to come up with somebody to run, which to me, that's hysterical because we're going to see what happens. You know, Hillary Clinton didn't quite work out the way they wanted. They were pissed. You know, and that's the one thing that people don't get this stuff, what really goes on. They don't get the real points of what goes on. You know, and everybody wants to talk about religion, but they don't want to talk about the Constitution. They don't want to learn the Constitution, but they're willing to go learn some foreign book from a foreign country instead of what's to protect us in our country. See, that's the one thing that you know, always has amazed me, you know, for years, how people sit there and they do this stuff. You know, and I mean, I get people all the time telling me, you know, because I'm in, you know, I get off on religion. I'm hard on religion. And I know that. And people get upset with me over it. And it's like, well, you know, I'm sorry you feel that way, but I mean, I'm not going to sit there and agree to that contract that says that I have to go by something called whatever God that you want to believe in. Because my God is the Constitution and Treaty. The Constitution and the treaties give us rights. Without those rights, we don't have freedom. Everybody goes, I'm free. And it's like, okay, every time you turn around, what are you paying for? See, you're not free, you're paying for it. If you were free, you wouldn't be paying for it. And that's what even House Resolution 192 was put in place of the Bankruptcy Act to protect we the people. And so when these people go, oh, the national debt, read the term national. It's the British government. It's the foreign agents. I'm just telling you the truth on that one. And you go into national, you type in federal national treasury, British government. Oh, you'll be really amazed what you see comes up there. But I mean, it does take, you know, a lot of time and doing all this research and going through this stuff and getting it.
Ed,
Go ahead.
what about that House Resolution 192? Are they supposed to be sending us checks?
No, we're not supposed to get checks from it. We're only supposed to get our water, electricity, food paid for it. Our basic living. Because when the 1933 Bankruptcy Act, they took our gold, silver, they took our basic way of living for our survival. So they took that from us. So that's what was put in place to give us that back. And if you actually read the foundation of it, that's exactly what it states.
But what,
go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I was going to say, but they're not sending anybody anything to take care of that, are they?
Some people are getting it. Some people are actually getting it. I've talked to people that are getting it. I had one guy walk me through some stuff, and then all of a sudden it was like, I didn't hear from him. But I mean, there are people that are getting it. It has worked. I mean, like I said, I tell you when I go in the hospital, I tell you what I say when I go in the hospital. I don't do that. I don't do paperwork. I don't do any of that stuff. You know, everybody does paperwork each and every time they go in the hospital, not me. You know, I mean, sometimes I will go in the hospital and I got blades on me. You know, and the security guard would come around the corner and go, "Hey, Ed!" And I'm like, "Oh, shit. I got to go put it in my backpack right now." Am I going to argue with them? Hell no. Because I know that the other patients in there, they're taught to be paranoid. They're not taught to be responsible. They're not taught to think. You know, it's like that one young lady her family was killed at a restaurant. And her gun was, not around because she didn't, not supposed to be able to carry a gun in a gun-free zone. And that's where most of the murders happen. So that's the one thing that always confirms and drives me nuts when you see what's going on and people don't get it. I talk to people, even religion, and they're like, "Oh no, religion is first, not the Constitution." Well, without the Constitution, you have no right to your religion. And we got religion wars still going on, and everybody keeps going, "Oh, we got to save Jerusalem." Jerusalem is the foundation of what? Muslim, Christianity, all that stuff, and we're supposed to go spend money and save them from who? We're not here to save them from themselves. Go ahead.
We're spending all this money to save them from themselves, not anything else.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and look what it's doing to the kids, too. The psychological trauma with everybody's arguing about religion and back and forth and what we should do. And, it's like, that's the other point that gets to me. We're arguing. That's like, Ron's going, classify yourself as a non-citizen. I sent him what I filed and what's been filed in Congress and what I've been filing in the newspapers and the media. And the newspapers, even stories and articles that the news wrote about me. And it's like, and he can't decipher what they stated in the paper. So, that's what gets to me when you got people out there that are pushing you in a direction that's telling you, well, the Vatican and the religion don't run the country because Ron's very religious. That's his right. But it's not his right to sit there and shove his religion down, and say that his religion is more important than the Constitution. It's not. So, that's the whole point about what we've got going on here, and it's reading the structure with the 14th Amendment, what really happened, why the Dred case is done. Read it. And that's the one thing I suggest to people. Read these court cases. That's when I put that letter out with a capital C and the lower C. The capital C was the structure of the Constitution before the Civil War. And then they changed it to the lower C. And then, at that point, it's like, what do you go by? Who cares? I won't go by their administrative rules because I do care. And that's the one thing is teaching the children so that way they care. They get the comprehension. They have feelings, emotions. I always thought it was interesting because one of my girlfriends, was interested. She was in and out of programs, which I didn't realize what I walked into, but Things happen in life. And, then she comes back from the Women's Crisis Creation Center, and it's all about feelers. You hurt my feelers. And it's like, what, you can't talk to me? You can't be honest? You can't say what's going on? You have to live in a psychological trauma in your own mind? And they do this to people. That's what psychological and these medications and all this stuff do to people. And so it is interesting when they've got this structure. I've had them trying to classify me at things, and it doesn't work. And that's the one thing, too. Pay attention when your doctor and your progress notes and stuff. And you want your progress notes from your doctor as well. The same thing as a progress note from a caseworker for DHS. Because they have to keep everything in working order. They have administrative rules they go by, and if they don't go by them, they get screwed. But they'll play the game because they want the money. They want to line their pocket with as much money as they can, or debt notes. And then we'll get into that one too. But like I said, next Saturday I will not be in town, and I will be back the following Saturday. And I'll get that posted up tonight at the end. But I will be posting this information that I brought up tonight on new.org and trackers, and I'll still put the police structure, and that's still up there too, in the 1938 Foreign Administration Registration Act. Because people got to realize that these things do mean something. If your country matters to you, then it should matter to you about what's going on around you. And see, that is the one thing that, it's the circumstances of what we're living. So, and that's the other point. What are we living? Because people say, oh, you're going to go to hell. Well, I'm living in hell. I've got, I've been dead. I've been shot, stabbed. I've been, been through all this stuff, and I'm still here. So I don't take it personal or stuff like what people do. Because, it's life. You can't get upset of life. Shit happens. I didn't want to have my medical situation the way that it's happened, but it's happened. And so what can I do about it? Basically nothing. Just survive and live. And that's what we all have to do. Survive and live. And how do we do that? With less problems and paying attention and learning what the system is. And I do encourage people to watch a movie called Interstate 60. It really does explain your court system. Even though you might not think so, but when you watch that movie, and I always recommend people watch it twice. Because when you watch it twice, then that way you get it. So, anyhow. So anybody else got anything else they would like to add? And, Ron, I wasn't going after you to pick on you or anything like that, but when you're sitting there telling people that the 1859 Constitution is the law of the land, and it's not. The 1846 Constitution is the law of the land, and it is the structure where it says it cannot be taxed. So, anyhow, anybody else would like to add anything further? Okay. With that, like I said, I will post the information up tonight once the gets reset up. I'll get all that posted up so people got that on reference material. They can always go back. It'll be up there posted for you. And so, anyhow, with that, may the Great Spirit and Mother Earth take care of you, and the Creator bless us all and look over us.
Thank you for listening to Disclaimers by Ed Johnston. As you can tell, I got a wee one behind that's wanting her milk, so we're going to cut this short. Have a good 2 weeks, and we'll see you not this Saturday, but the Saturday after.
Right.